So good afternoon. My name is Davide Ponzini. I'm a professor of urban planning at Politecnico di Milano. Together with Andrea Arcidiacono, Stefano Di Vita, Zachary Jones, and Abdallah Girej, we organized this event, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you first and kicking off today's works. The title of today's seminar is 2026 Winter Olympics, Dialogues Between the City and the Alpine Macro Region. The idea for this event came from two recent publications by Politecnico researchers, including myself and the other colleagues I mentioned before, namely Milan Cultural Mega Events and Beyond the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. You will find a few copies of these books on the table in case you want to see them. This event intends to spark further debate regarding the 2026 Games and their broader urban and regional implications. After a keynote speech and a brief introduction to the two books, a number of public administrators and experts will discuss these issues. But first, we will start with the welcoming remarks. The Politecnico di Milano Rector's Delegate for Sports, Professor Metrangolo, will give a brief speech. Pierangelo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Davide. It's a great pleasure being here. So welcome to Politecnico di Milano. I've really the pleasure to, start this seminar today because this is dedicated to the Winter Olympics 2026. As you may know, it will be a great event for the city. So a great event comes with opportunities, but also with, some challenges. And it's nice that today, as far as I know, you are going to discuss both. So opportunities and challenges of organized so big events. But the other way around, for such a big event in the city, Politecnico di Milano wants to be an actor at play. So that's why we are working on a roadmap to Winter Olympics. And I'm happy to say that this is one of the first, seminar and event of this roadmap. So we are building up new labs. For example, the Cryo Lab, it's a lab for testing at very low temperatures, ice conditions. We are working together with architects, designers, and engineers for developing this roadmap to the Olympics. What we are doing at the moment, we are working with Fondazione Milan Cortina. We are working with Fondazione Cortina. We are working, with the region, Lombardy region, and the Comune di Milano, just for creating, the best condition for a Politecnico Milano, our university, to be, an actor in this sense. From what concerns sports, actually, what can I say is that Polimi is really investing a lot in infrastructures, investing, in this big new infrastructure in Bovisa campus. So the Gasometro dello Sport, it's a full new building dedicated to sport. Is investing in the restructuring of the Giuriati Center, in creating new big events. For example, just to remember you that, we organized last May the Polimi Run, which was, run by more than 14,000 people. And I just received yesterday a life cycle assessment of the drinking water that we give to the Polimi riders. And actually, the Polimi runners have consumed something like 12,000 bricks of water, and we recycle them all. So we reach 95%, recycling, and also 92% quality. So sustainability is an important issue for big events, and I'm pretty sure this will be another huge challenge, for next Olympics. So last but not least, I just wanted to say that Polimi is paying so much attention to sport that I can, announce officially to you that next inauguration of the academic year, 11 November, 11 o'clock, will be dedicated to sport. And this is a huge, actually, gives a huge idea of what sports represent into Politecnico as a way to break barriers, to include all people, and to invest into technology for humanities. So with this, I just wanted to conclude, thanking again, Davide, and welcoming all of you, and saying happy seminar, good work. We will see you. I mean, I will stay the whole seminar and happy to contribute to the roundtable. Thank you very much.
So thank you. The Department of Architecture and Urban Studies of Politecnico di Milano supports this event. Professor Massimo Bricoccoli is the director of the department. Unfortunately, he cannot be present today with us. I'm going to read a welcome message he has sent. Dear colleagues, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, I cannot be with you today as I was invited to present our research on affordable housing at the 85th session of the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management at the United Nations in Geneva. Through this letter, I want to warmly welcome you on behalf of Politecnico di Milano and the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies. DASTU is a large department with more than 190 scholars developing academic research, applied research in a variety of disciplines. Today's event represents an important outcome of the kind of work we carry out at the department. Our academic research and long-term engagement with the public administration aim to contribute to public knowledge and debate on complex issues, such as the case of the 2026 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. I would like to thank the colleagues who contributed to the research and publications and organized this event, as well as all the participants and contributors for being here. The planning and legacies of these games will impact the future of the city and of Northern Italy. A group of qualified researchers have been working in response to the research call of the urban center of the city of Milan for several years. Our PhD program in urban planning, design, and policy involved 15 young PhD researchers and several faculty members for about 1 year in connection with the public administration and communities of the Valtellina mountain area in Lombardy. These projects delivered important academic publications that we can appreciate today, notably the 2 books, Milan Cultural Mega Events and Beyond the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. At the same time, they generated usable knowledge, and we wish this can support the design of policies and projects, as well as an open public debate. Clearly, the 2026 Winter Games imply controversial matters when it comes to planning and legacy in such a large and complex regional system. Our university setting offers a public arena where different actors can meet and openly discuss based on sound research outcomes. I do not expect that all will necessarily agree, but I hope this opportunity will help deepen the public understanding of the issues at stake. Once again, welcome. I am sorry not to be able to enjoy the seminar. I wish you a fruitful discussion. I sincerely hope that this discussion will contribute to the ongoing public debate regarding the 2026 Games and the future of our country. This was a message sent by the head of our department, Professor Bricoccoli. So, as I mentioned, and as Professor Bricoccoli mentioned in his letter, the PhD program in urban planning, design, and policy promoted 1 workshop regarding the planning for the 2026 Games in Valtellina. Professor Gaeta is the coordinator of the program, and I will give the floor to him. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to say welcome to all participants in this meeting this afternoon. Most things already have been said regarding the argument and the motivation for gathering today, but it's my pleasure to underline that one of the books we are going to discuss stems directly from teaching activity at doctoral level. Each year, we as a PhD program in urban planning promote a research by design workshop. In 2022, we took the chance of focusing this workshop on the Valtellina Valley, not only on the immediate needs for hosting the games, but also on the legacy that will be left for the Valley after the Games. And we had a large group of 17 candidates from 8 to 9 different countries, including Italy, but also Chile, India, China, Spain, and others, traveling together and staying in Bormio for a week, interacting with real local stakeholders, policymakers, not only, of course, local policymakers, and collecting valuable information, elaborating this information, and also imagining policies that can help the local community to benefit from the Games and also prevent any possible damage from over-tourism and other nuisances that can be related to the Games. Of course, also the second book indirectly stems from research in the realm of doctoral studies, because Professor Poncini is part of our board of professors. Zachary Jones is a former PhD candidate at Politecnico di Milano, as well as Abdallah Jirej is a current candidate, still now in the phase of concluding his path. I think this way of communicating between the area of researching into the university and the area of policy making outside the university is incredibly important for us, for our candidates to grow and to learn urban and regional planning for real, not only from books. And this is what they did. And I think they did it successfully. I only mention Professor Arcidiacono, Andrea Arcidiacono, who unfortunately is not with us today, but is connected online, who originally conceived the workshop in Valtellina and organized it and managed this workshop together with Stefano Di Vita for us, colleagues and students. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. So I will say a few words of introduction to lay the ground, and then we can move on with the program. As we argue in the two books that we will present later today, the 2026 Winter Olympic Games has some novelty in its planning. Historically, it is going to be the first Winter Olympiad that will implement the new approach of the Agenda 2020 by the IOC. The plans and projects are required to maximize the reuse of existing infrastructures and facilities and the use of temporary structures, so to be more sustainable and limit the risk of white elephants. White elephants are facilities that are too large to be used after mega events, as it often happens with the Olympics. It is a great sustainability challenge, as we will learn later. It is also an urban challenge, as the reuse of sport facilities and infrastructures implies different spatial model involving the existing city fabric and putting it under tremendous stress. Second, the 2026 Games are a novelty because they are the largest spatial system in the history of the Olympics. We call it macro region that hosts multiple clusters and venues. For the Olympics, Milan sits at the core of this macro regional system, but the spatial vision and planning for the Olympics do not provide a robust and long-term framework in space to support the individual interventions in Lombardy, Veneto, Trentino, and Bolzano regions. These interventions amount to several billion euros of public expenditure, and they can be a great opportunity for the development of northern Italy and the whole country. In some instances, the public follows individual projects, sometimes responding to the private sector's needs, rather than a long-term plan in space, as I argued, for the sustainable development of northern Italy and possibly beyond. Third, the governance of this system is very, very complex. Multiple institutions and powers are involved at different levels, and the hard deadline is imminent for the 2026 games. What kind of governance legacy this will produce, and we will see in 2026 and 2027, is not entirely clear today. Milan will end a mega event decade from the Expo 2015 to the 2026 and will benefit from this input to its change. But nonetheless, it's a big challenge to keep the transformation in the subsequent years. Today, we will hear mainly from two elements of this system, Milan and Valtellina. But we know that the picture is far more complex and uncertain at every political turn. For these reasons, today's event includes three main components. First, we will have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Daniel Wolfe of ETH Zurich about the planning of sustainable mega events. Second, we will introduce the two books very briefly, as we don't assume you all have read the books. Finally, we will hear directly from the public administrators, the event planners, the experts about the planning, delivery, and legacy of the games. I now have the pleasure of inviting our keynote speaker to the podium, and I'm happy to briefly introduce his profile. Daniel Wolfe is a political and urban geographer, Swiss National Science Foundation Ambizione Fellow, co-founder of the City Collaboratory Urban Studies Research Network. He is the vice president of the Swiss Association of Geography. He works on the social spatial impacts of mega events, urban sustainable development, and the everyday geopolitics. His Ambizione project at ETH looks at the after effects of hosting mega events on a range of cities around the globe. Among other publications, he recently edited the volume, The Hard Edge of Soft Power, Mega Events, Geopolitics, and Making Nations Great Again. He is also a regular commentator in a variety of international media, including the New York Times, Bloomberg, Politico, BBC, and others. I'm very happy on behalf of Politecnico to invite him to the podium and give the floor to him. So Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Davide. May I have the clicker, please? Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues at the Politecnico, members of commune administrations, residents of these extremely beautiful regions, dear friends, thank you so much for the invitation to speak here. It is really a profound honor to be here, and I hope this is not the last time that we can meet. In the short time that we have together today, I am not going to talk about Milan at all. I think we have the world's experts on Milan existing cultural fabric, socio-spatial fabric, and the upcoming mega events. But I will talk about mega events in general and sustainability based on more than 10 years or so of experience that I've had studying these phenomena across a range of experiences, starting with the preparations for the Winter Olympics in Sochi 2014 and going all the way to Paris this summer. I've divided my talk into roughly four pieces. Since I'm an academic, we have to make sure that we're talking very much about the same thing. So I'll start with these definitions. What do we mean when we say sustainability? And then, as Davide mentioned, I will also talk about some of the ways in which the Olympic movement and mega events more generally have been adapting to the context of crisis that we are all living through. There's an ecological crisis, a political crisis, social, economic. We're beset by this poly crisis, and yet somehow at the same time we have these incredible global celebrations, and that adds a new dimension to planning challenges. I'll also talk about some of the ways in which those adaptations have succeeded and some of the ways that they have not. And then very humbly at the end, a few suggestions for how we can think about things going forward to avoid the problems of the past. So let's get started. The beginning really comes down to this problem that I have with the word sustainability. We all think that we know what it means, but it really it behooves us to spend a minute talking about what exactly that word, that very loaded, very complicated, fuzzy word means. So over 10 years ago, Mark White made a study about, this has nothing to do with mega events, this is just use generally in the academic literature. And you see sustainability is the big word there. Everything else is sort of based on the size. This word cloud shows the usages, the common usages of the term. So you can see, the environment is of course a big one, but also economic and social, and a little bit lower, human, and then very at the bottom, ecological, and then equity. The point about this is that sustainability is what we call a floating signifier. It means different things at different times to different people in different contexts. And I think this is one of the most important things that we can really get into our into our heads when we're going through planning, because what you mean by sustainability is not necessarily what I mean, which is not necessarily what the residents of a city mean. And so oftentimes we find ourselves talking at cross purposes, and this can lead to conflict. My definition of sustainability comes from the Brundtland Report, in 1987, very basic, about meeting the needs of the present without sacrificing the ability of the future to meet their own needs. But this supposedly simple definition brings with it a lot of problems when it meets the complex planning realities and existing political structures, the political economic ways in which we provide for ourselves now are not such an easy thing to manage. So let's take a look quickly at what this looks like in the world of mega events. Mega events and sustainability are now inextricably intertwined, but really they go back quite a ways. And they talk about really green games. So originally in 1992, the United Nations had this conference which had an entire element, how can sport help the natural environment? In 95, the United Nations Environmental Program had the World Congress on Sport and Environment, which led to sort of policy documents and institutional affiliation that led to the International Olympic Committee's Agenda 21. And this had some real environmental principles installed in it, which led to this creation of Olympic Games that had an increasing environmental consciousness. Sometimes they're more bottom up, as happened in Lillehammer. So local organizers had a strong environmental focus based on Norwegian culture and such. Other times it was sort of a hybrid, sometimes more successful, sometimes less successful. Sydney 2000 was branded very much as the Green Games. And partly that had to do with planning focus on rehabilitating an environmentally fragile and damaged area. I think it's Homebush Bay. But of course, there's other stories that we could tell, and we'll talk about that later. Increasing sort of blending between policy worlds. We have, in 2009, the United Nations gives the International Olympic Committee permanent observer status, which lets them participate in the creation of actual policy, and leads to, in 2015, the inclusion of sports as an enabler of sustainable development in the Sustainable Development Goals, which is an incredible coup for an international sporting organization, and really sets the tone, leading to beyond the International Olympic Committee, a lot of different mega events. Rights holders and sort of policy assemblages are using sustainability language in their plans, but whether that's real or not is very different. And I remind you that there's this floating signifier problem that we always have. So FIFA's definition of sustainability is quite different from the International Olympic Committee's. And then, as Davide was saying, it's an incredibly complex planning environment. And so when you have different members of local administrations, and then federal and national and international and sporting organizations and everything working with a profit motive, it gets extraordinarily complicated, especially when we don't mean the same things when using the same words. So the real question for me right now is green, green games the same thing as sustainable? And what exactly do we mean with sustainability? So with my colleagues, David Gobishvili, Martin Mueller, I wrote a chapter in this book on major sporting events that addressed this problem. And so I kind of copied Mark White's idea with sustainability and looked at it only in terms of mega events literature. And you see that down here, I don't have a ring laser thing, unfortunately. It looks like it's out of battery. So anyway, if you look at the bottom, you'll see sort of the highest proportion, of course, has to do with ecological, but people also, an ecological understanding of sustainability, I mean. But you see also, a high usage of social and economic terms, as well as, sustainable urban development. And then up at the top, you can see a few brave people are writing about greenwashing, the idea of, using sustainable images and sustainable language, but not actually having sustainable practices. The language doesn't actually match the rhetoric. This led to us working on this notion of sustainable mega events in a slightly older article, but we worked on three terms. So an ecological understanding of sustainability, an economic understanding, and a social understanding. And with this, we built a model. This would be absolutely great to have a laser, but if you look at the top, you see, and I'm not sure if you can actually see it from all the way back there, but at the top, there's three different variables that we use to construct this model. And the general idea here, understand the ecological sustainability, is say new constructions, visitor footprint, and event size. And in general, the larger an event is, the less we're going to rate it as sustainable. The more new constructions you have, as was mentioning, white elephant infrastructures, these infrastructures that don't match the existing sort of needs of the host cities, the less sustainable it's going to be in ecological terms. But this is also tied to an economic understanding of sustainability. So you have three more variables down here: long-term viability, financial exposure, and budget balance. So long-term viability, that's the usage over the long term. I mean, imagine if you build a stadium for $400 million, that money has to come from somewhere, and then you don't ever use it again. You have a disposable stadium. That's not economically sustainable. Financial exposure refers to the public share of funding. It's one thing if there's private investors who are on the hook for this. It's another thing entirely if it's the public, because that money has to come from somewhere. Hospitals, schools, roads, police, fire, housing, all of these other needs can get subsumed by the planning urgency of the mega event, especially when you have the glare of the international spotlight that's on top of you. And so you have national prestige on the line. You're not going to be able to fail at preparing for the event. And budget balance simply refers to what people plan for, what they promise the event is going to cost, and then what actually ends up happening. And unfortunately, mega events have a terrible track record for this. They always break their budgets to greater or lesser degrees. That's the economic idea of sustainability. And then if you move to the pink here, you'll see social. And this refers to, starting from the top, public approval. Do people like it or not? And that's really important. These are incredibly powerful games or events that gather people together. And if you've ever been to one, you know that the atmosphere is magic. And since you're all going to host it here, you will actually feel that power. And it's not a joke. It is a really, it's almost, it's this festival atmosphere that stays with people forever. And that matters. It matters to have good feelings in cities. It matters to bring people together. And I think it's an important thing to include. At the same time, if you look down at social safety, that generally refers to displacement of the population. Games are unfortunately, especially those tied with ambitious urban development agendas, they tend to be tied to a logic of gentrification and displacement. Especially the poorer you are, the more marginalized you are, the more likely you are to be displaced for the games. And so if people are displaced, we measure the games as less sustainable. And finally, the rule of law refers to whether or not there's changes in legislation that then ultimately have the risk of harming the local population. So this is how we built our model, and each one of these turns out to be a dimension. So if you take a look at, say, Sydney, and when we collected data for that, this is what it looks like. And so the bigger the piece of pie here, the more sustainable it is. And so you can see in terms of public approval, there's that giant piece of pie. People loved the Sydney Games. Social safety is sort of in the middle. There were some people displaced, but not tons. It's a sort of a question of like how many people displaced is too many. And then down here at the bottom, in terms of rule of law and budget balance, that's not no data. That is just really, really poor sustainability according to our model. It means that they changed a lot of laws and they completely broke their budget. So you can see the sort of the sustainability profile of Sydney. And importantly, you notice how small the green pieces of pie are up at the top. So despite the discourse of Sydney being these green games, our model showed that it really wasn't that ecologically sustainable. How did we collect this? We built a database. We have something like 197 different variables that we used that we collected from every summer and winter Olympics from 1960 up to 2018 or 2020, including men's football World Cups and a couple of expos thrown in for good measure. And this database, it was not comprehensive, but the idea was to get as good of a picture as we could to make a comparison between disparate events. This is what it looked like when we populated it. We took, starting from the very top left, Albertville in 1992 and Barcelona in 1992. This is the winter and the summer Olympics, and this is a sustainability profile for every game since the sort of green turn in 1992. And again, if you look at how, see, this would be like a very, very sustainable games according to our measure. And you can see that, you know, some of them fit this and others don't. So the whole point of this is not to say whether or not a game is sustainable, it's to say how is it sustainable. And again, not to be overly critical here, but also, you know, I'm an optimist. I want to look at how we can improve. So if you have, a games that has a low sustainability score, the question is, why did that happen, and how can we avoid that going forward into the future? Because we want better outcomes for all. We don't want to repeat the problems of the past. You can do a lot of stuff with this data. We arranged it by the best of sustainability scores. Now, I remind you that this is a model, and as the saying goes, all models are lies, but they can be useful. These results, we tried to balance this to be as fair as you could. You can win this. You can get a sustainability score of 100, just as you could get a sustainability score of 0. But it's a very easy thing to criticize about, you can construct a model a different way. And so my encouragement is not to say that this is an absolute representation of truth, but you'll see a lot of models out there. And my encouragement, especially to the early career scholars in the audience, would be to interrogate the model and see if there might be an ideological or a political underpinning that influences the way in which that model is constructed. Perhaps that there might be, in fact, an ulterior motive to present a certain perception of reality. But nevertheless, our model, which we worked to create a fair and is at least transparent, shows surprisingly that Salt Lake City 2002, Albertville 92, and Barcelona 92 are the most sustainable. They're not super sustainable, they're not in the green zone, but they are the most sustainable there. And likewise, Tokyo, Rio, and Sochi are the least sustainable. So what's also interesting is you can look at this chronologically. So if you go over here, you see this is 1992, and it goes all the way down to Tokyo. And what I find interesting here, there's a green line that refers to the ecological scores, and then the pink one for social, and then a yellow one for economic, and then the black one overall. And I know it's a lot, but the thing to really pay attention to is just two things. One, notice the variability. There are some games that do better, and there are some games that do worse. And so my question then would be why? And overall, there's this trend line that is going down. And so I note that there's this paradox happening because, at the same time as you're talking more and more and more about sustainability, the actual sustainability results are going down. So we have a paradox. Finally, the last thing, since you all are going to be hosting the Winter Olympics, this is an average of the Summer Olympics on the left and the Winter Olympics on the right. And a few interesting things to note. The Winter Olympics tend to be more sustainable in terms of visitor footprint. There are fewer people who come, simply. Also, they're less popular than the summer games. People seem to like the summer games a little bit more, which is interesting. But also, if you look at that new construction, that there is an opportunity, in my opinion, to improve. The fewer things that you have to build, the better. And this brings me to this notion that Davide mentioned of Olympic reform, because one of the problems with our model is it assumes that the Olympics are static, and they're not static. There's an entirely different sort of shifting landscape of policy and reform. And Agenda 2020, if you don't know, is this important change, a wholesale reform of the Olympic planning processes, which is super complicated, and you can get into it if you wish. But the idea is really the second one, the better fit to the host cities. Trying to establish the existing profile, development trajectory of the host cities, and rather than having the Olympics come in and imposing spatial forms, planning processes, trying to take into better account the existing realities of the host city. They did it in a couple of ways, revising the requirements. The Olympic Village is smaller. They have different planning. They're allowing different planning models for the games. We're emphasizing public transportation, emphasizing non-purpose-built venues, to avoid those white elephants, unnecessary infrastructures, using existing stadiums, sharing different stadiums. And overall, the idea is to lower the cost of the Olympics because they're exorbitantly expensive and the public tends to pay for them. So lower the cost, make them simpler, lower the risk, increase the value, increase the sustainability. But what, again, do they mean by sustainability? And overall, this is their motto: reimagining, redesigning, rethinking, and reshaping the organization of the Olympic Games. It is hard to understate what an important shift that was. I happened to be doing interviews at the International Olympic Committee at the time, and I have to say there were people who were really taking it seriously. And it was interesting to see that on the ground in Paris. So these are some photos that I took. This is the part of the talk where it gets to be a slideshow, because otherwise you're just listening to me go on and on. What does it look like, this process of reform? Well, this is a temporary structure. You can see it. It might not look terribly lovely, but it is gone afterwards, right? They're not leaving these new structures, possibly unused or underused, in the city. If you worry about some of the ugliness of the temporary structures, this is also a temporary structure. It's called the Grand Palais Éphémère, the ephemeral Grand Palace, and it's beautiful. Some of the structures are more functional, but all of these are to be taken down. And that's super important. What is it like for the experience? Well, this is that first venue. It's stunning. I mean, it's a breathtaking venue. Beach volleyball here with nothing no sport that I've ever seen. And I could just sit there and watch it. I forgot even that there was a game on because it's so pretty. That's the Grand Palais. There's fencing in there. It's absolutely stunning venue again. This is the Stade de France. They're multi-purpose using it. They used it for rugby. They used it for football. They're using it for athletics. The point is that they're using the existing venue profile here with high usage of temporary and already existing venues, and that's a huge advantage and a direct effect of the processes of reform. They also worked really well on public transit. So every metro was decorated with these pink signs that were immediately recognizable. They had their own purpose-built app, which monitored traffic flow in real time, shifted. It suggested different routes that you could take based on public transit usage. They had these incredible signs and paths leading you through what's a complicated urban environment or urban transport environment, and they filled with volunteers who were directing you in signs all over the place. It was quite expensive to get around. They broke a promise to have public transit be free, but nevertheless, it was extraordinarily successful and very easy to move around. Culturally, it was a triumph. Every arrondissement had a free-to-access fan zone that went day to night. It had a very, a big screen, party atmosphere. You could get a drink, watch the games. Outside in the departments, they had larger places with public parks. here's a bunch of teenagers exploring what it's like to be a Paralympian and play wheelchair ball. They had parties here in Club France, for example, concerts, they'd show the events and then, party all night long. And this is the Olympic torch. So it's, you don't have to pass security or anything. It's in a park. You just sort of sit there. People are having picnics. And I cannot overstate how impressive it was. It was a tremendous party atmosphere, and it matters. It really, especially now when we have so much division and conflict and sort of existential fear, to be on the ground with people from 100 different nations and everybody walking sort of in the same direction and the same sort of togetherness mindset. I know it sounds like I'm selling something for the Olympics, and I'm not. I don't know how to measure it with a model, and I don't know how long it lasts, but I do know that it was real and it mattered to a lot of people, especially French people, but all the international visitors who were there. That's something that I think has to be said. At the same time, there were a lot of problems. There was a small but vocal protest movement that says Paris 2024 for the millionaires. And this is true. The games are quite exclusive. They're aimed at people with money and means, and they're aimed at visitors, not necessarily at Parisians, at visitors from other places in France who came. And so actual residents, especially the more marginalized ones, felt quite left out. This one says, here, in order to welcome all the nations, we had to evict all those who are already here. Protest posters showing about the gentrification and outright evictions from some squats and some other places in the northern department. There was a protest. This is a counter-Olympics, counter-opening ceremony that happened. And they had some really interesting posters. This is against these two are against the hike in transit fares because it was €2 for a ride and it became €4 for a ride. I was there for 4 or 5 weeks, and my ticket ran out because I was traveling much more than I originally planned, because planning is hard, and it hurt to have to buy a new carnet of tickets at double the price. That was not an awesome thing. And for the locals, of course, this is the Olympic slogan, higher, faster, stronger, but it's surveillance, higher and faster and stronger surveillance in reference to security cameras with artificial intelligence facial recognition technology that were installed in the metro system, bypassing normal planning processes. This says 15 years of party, over 15 days of party for 15 years of debt, talking about the lack of economic sustainability. And in general, this is this idea of liberating yourself from Olympism, all the problems that are involved with mega events and a lack of sustainability overall. But what does that look like, not in the protest community, but actually on the street? So this is, right by the river, and it's restricted access. You can't get there. Especially on the, as you will find out, on the run-up right to the opening ceremonies, the pressure is incredibly high. There's police everywhere. There's barriers. You can't go anywhere. The public, the people who just sort of live in Paris can't go anywhere. This is a Google. It's on my phone. I took a screen cap here to show how mobility is severely restricted. And remember that this is a living city that shows, people live on one side and they need to go to work on the other side. And how are you supposed to do that? It's not the easiest thing in the world, but outside of the tourist zones, so there were a bunch of people who'd been evicted from a squat. They had nowhere to go, so they set up their tents under this bridge. This is far from the tourist center, but the local authorities kicked them out and put up these concrete blocks to stop them from coming back, which is not a very kind thing to do to people who don't have houses. And so there's, existing planning problems, existing housing problems that are imbricated along with the planning for the mega events, and that exists. So we have this problem. We've got, on one hand, this huge national and international party that really means something. It's super important. Unity, beauty, competition, joy, love, festival, all of that. At the same time, you have this increase in authoritarian practices. This is the man in the back with the beard. His name is Noah. I know him. He's an anti-Olympics organizer, and he's being arrested here outside of a metro station where he was coming to take 3 or 4 French journalists to just show them some of the sights of change. He's not organizing a protest or anything, but he wants to show the journalists here. He was met outside of the metro, probably because of facial recognition software, held for 10 hours, questioned and fined. He tried to do it again 3 days later, and he was pulled at a different metro station and met exactly the same. So, you know, that's happening at the same time as this incredible beauty. But we don't really see this. What happens is we get this beautiful surface that hides some of the existing problems. What you can't see behind this fence is there's a popular quarter where lower income, mostly migrant background French people are living, and they were evicted, but you don't see it because of the, the beautiful signage. How do you make sense of that academically? Again, I'm an academic. I make reference to the concept of Potemkinism or Potemkinism, depending on how you want to say it. This is a concept that comes from the time of the Russian Empire with the Empress Catherine the Great, who was traveling down this river to show to explore the newly conquered territories of what we now call Ukraine. And the statesman and her consort, Grigory Potemkin, had built along the sides of this river these facades of villages. Now, it's not really meant to trick the empress. I mean, she's not a fool. She can see that they're not built. It's more to show, like a mock-up. Hey, this is what the new villages are going to look like. But it's entered our language as a notion of artifice or deceit, a superficial surface that hides something different behind that surface. And so this was absolutely gorgeous. It was the most incredible opening ceremonies I've ever seen, and people were weeping. It's not an exaggeration. And yet this existing reality is happening underneath. And that's exactly what you're going to see in Milan, and that's exactly what we see everywhere that we've done this study. So I'll just conclude with a sort of a couple of humble suggestions to remind you that there are very impressive moves towards sustainability, especially regarding existing infrastructures and this transit and this utterly vital, but probably unmeasurable value of partying. The problems still exist. They're very exclusive. The more money you have, the better of a time you're going to be, the more privileged access that you have. The fundamental question when we talk about sustainability, I think, is to ask what is being sustained and for whom and how. So is it an unequal business practice that's being sustained, or is it and who's going to benefit from these processes? Ultimately, again, I'm trying to make an argument for positivity. Like, how can we keep the best part, but also get rid of the most damaging aspects, especially since you're already committed to this as a city? There's a philosophical question. Can we do what we want and need to provide for the residents of the cities and host mega events? Or are mega events just fundamentally unsustainable? Do they have to be abolished? Do they have to be changed so dramatically that we won't even recognize them anymore? And given the ecological crises, as well as the economic crises and political crises that we're facing, those are questions that really need to be answered sooner rather than later. And ultimately, I think the goal would be to have games that are based on a true understanding of inclusivity. So changing the definition of what it means to be a stakeholder and having not an elite perspective included in the planning processes, but actual people who are actually implicated, and they are really the hosts of these events. With that, I will leave it. Say grazie mille. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great job. Thank you, Daniel. So now, as I said, second component of this event, we are going to present briefly the two books, and I now invite Stefano Di Vita, who is one of the co-authors of the Milan Cultural Mega Event.
So thank you very much. I will try to be very short in this presentation because today we present two books. And this is the first one of the two books we are going to present today. The title of this book is Milan Cultural Mega Event, From the Expo Through the Olympics. And the book was written by Davide, Zachary, Abdallah, and me. with also the collaboration with the prop for the cartography and for the photography that you can find inside the book. Just a few words about the structure of this very brief presentation. We introduce very quickly the research and the book structure, and then we decided to focus the presentation on two main topics that you can find inside the book. The first, the phase of transition between the Expo to the Winter Olympics. That is one of, let's say, the topic that we consider inside this book. An analysis of cultural Olympiads, because we spend some words in this book about the potential of cultural Olympiads, and then we try to do some reflection about Milan in perspective of the Winter Games. In this book, you can find the outcomes of a research that our group did in the last years, in particular in 2020-21. It was the research funded by the Milan Urban Center together with Fondazione La Triennale. And it's not banal to consider the period in which we did this research, because as we told you, it was a period of after the Expo, waiting for the Olympics, so in this period of transition between the two events, but it was the period of the COVID pandemic, with all the consequences that the COVID pandemic generated in terms of cultural crisis, economic crisis, the tourist activity, the crisis of the tourist flows. No? And so we have to consider also the period in which we did this research, or the first part of this research. Inside the book, we try to discuss more or less what we call 5 propositions in order to problematize what we define as the mega event decade in Milan, from the Expo to the Winter Olympics. And we organized the book in these 5 parts, 5 chapters, we can say. In the first chapter, we try to, starting from international case studies, we try to understand and to study what happened in previous case studies about mega events, specifically focusing on the spatial point of view. In terms of spatial planning, spatial policy, so maybe this is one of the characteristics of the research we did, this spatial analysis, because we are architects and urban planners, and so we are interested in mega events, but in particular in the spatial characteristics. In the second and in the third chapter, we try to observe the legacy of the Milan Expo, waiting for the Olympics, and in particular, we focused on the cultural legacy of the Milan Expo and on the role of the cultural heritage. The role of the cultural heritage that, as you can find in the book, is also important in the Olympic, in the Winter Olympics 2026. We think it could be important also in the Winter Olympics. And then we dedicated the 4th chapter of the book to the analysis of the cultural Olympiads. We will see later why, and also to the European cultural of capital of culture in Europe, because we think they provide interesting inputs, contributions, suggestions to better relate a sport event like the Olympics to the host city and the host region. And then a last chapter is dedicated to sum up, which are the legacies of this, what we call the mega event decades, through different case studies and in perspective, thinking to the case of Milan. Some information that you can find, some, let's say, important learnings, we can say, that you can find in the book. We know that the Expo in Milan has been perceived as a turning point in the urban transformation of the city, an urban transformation of the city that was already ongoing. And in this growth, we can understand the success in terms of visitor of the Expo 2015, but we cannot ignore that the Expo is only an episode of an already growing touristification of the city in positive way and also in negative way. Despite the big break of the pandemic, of course, this trend is still growing, and so the Expo can be considered one of the episodes of this cultural and tourist development of Milan. But what about the Expo legacy? Also in this term, we can find some pros and cons, and we dedicated pages in the book in order to understand better these pros and cons. Around 3,000 millions of euros of public investment in the site, in the Expo site, but this cost is higher if we consider also the regional infrastructure and the post-event transformation. We consider one of the problems in the post-event transformation of the Expo site because, as you know, there is an interesting project that is ongoing, that is the MIND project, but it's a project that starts late and it will take a long time before its completion, that is planned for the 2032, but there are also some uncertainties about the real estate market trends and some decision about the new university campus. So is it the legacy or not? Maybe we have to wait 2032 to understand if it is the real legacy, the spatial legacy of the Expo 2015. In the book, we try to, we focus our attention on the Expo in Città. Also highlighting that maybe this is the real, until now, the real spatial legacy of this event. The Expo in Città was a program that was launched 1 year before the Expo by the Milan municipality and Milan Chamber of Commerce. It was a program that mobilized hundreds of cultural actors in the city. Here you can find some number. In the book you can find also some data and maps in which we try to understand which is the geography of this event that, as you can understand from this map, is radically different in comparison to the official site of the Expo that was concentrated into only one big site. No? Here, the spatial model is completely different. We are talking about thousands of events spread all around the metropolitan area. And the greatest part of them were located in places which were temporarily used or reused for the on the occasion of this event. So also driving a kind of diffused regeneration. Expo in Città is, so we in the book, we highlighted that maybe until now, one of the most important legacy for Milan is the Expo in Città, and it's not the case that this model was experimented in Milan. We know that in Milan, for years, there is the Fuori Salone, and so the spatial development model of the Expo in Città is very similar to that of the Fuori Salone. But in the book, we also highlighted the contribution of the Expo in Città in a change of the urban agenda that is occurring in this period and was started at least 10 years ago. With pros and cons also in this case. In this new urban agenda that Milan is promoting in the last year, we can find some risk of further festivalization and touristification of the city, but at the same time there are interesting efforts and further potential for a social, spatial and environmental regeneration that in the recent history of Milan are not banal to consider. No? So there is, in this term, a radical change in the urban development model. According to what happened during the Expo and after the Expo, in the book, we try to figure out, I don't know, some light and shadow also about the 2026 Winter Olympics, focusing on Milan, but considering that the Winter Olympics are spread also in the Alpine region. And so there are 4 clusters, not only Milan, but also 3 other clusters, as you can see in this map, are spread in the mountain region. This is one of the first Olympics under the umbrella of the new norm of the International Olympic Committee. And so what is positive is that the greatest part of the venues are included in already planned transformation or are developed through the use of existing venues. But in this macro-regional size of the event, we noticed, and we highlighted it in the book, fragmented governance and a weak regional and macro-regional spatial vision that maybe could be, let's say, reflected in perspective of the legacy. There are some delays in the organization of the games. This means that the main focus now is on the event side, on the deadline, and so in the book we highlighted the importance of the legacy plan because this is what is remaining. Also, in the previous presentation, it was underlined the importance of the legacy and not only of the event. For this reason, in the book, we focused on the Cultural Olympiad. We try to analyze some international case studies, London and Rio, for instance, identifying pros and cons of this model and thinking that also for the Winter Olympics 2026, the Cultural Olympiad could provide us some, I don't know, suggestions for how to better integrate the event and the city, avoiding the risk to concentrating only on the event venues. Also in this case, there are pros and cons. The London case studies is positive, that of Rio not, and so also in this case, we have considered different alternatives and we have to study better. So which is the final question that we can synthesize in the final chapter of the book. We, starting from the ex-Città model and its positive legacy for the city, one of the questions is how this model could be reinterpreted by the Cultural Olympiad in order to strengthen the new urban agenda of the city. This is a question, for instance, for the city of Milan, but we can expand it also to the macro regional area that involves the 2026 Winter Olympics involved, with a specific focus also in this case on the spatial vision, with an important role of the cultural heritage beyond the only icons and the only tourist value of the cultural heritage, and strengthening the mobilization of various actors. And the university also has this role as third mission of the university. So I try to synthesize in this way, and I now leave the floor to Andrea Arcidiacono for the second presentation, the second book on the Valtellina case. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Andrea Arcidiacono unfortunately cannot be here as he fell ill and cannot be present in person, but he will present from the WebEx platform we are using for streamlining the event. And I remind Andrea very briefly, highlights just of the book as the time is of essence. Andrea, I think if you want to turn on your microphone, we can.
Yes, you can hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
You
so
can?
the
Okay.
floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, or rather good evening, everyone. Considering the time, I try to stay in 10 minutes, you listen at me. First of all, I would like to also, I'm really sorry that I can't be there because fortunately I'm not well. I'm in good company with the COVID virus now, and so I'm not here. I'm not there. I try to be very quickly in my presentation. First of all, the book, the title is Behind the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. sustainable scenarios from the Valtellina mountain region. I was one of the editors of the book together with Stefano De Vita. I have to say thank you to Stefano for the great work he did in editing the book, but also all the PhD candidates are involved that Professor Gaeta mentioned at the beginning in his speech. 17 PhD candidates are the authors of the different part of this book, together with the other colleagues, Davide Pozzini, Ilaria Mariotti, Andrea Rolando, Gabriele Pasqui, and maybe that I don't remember all the colleagues involved, but these are the main. And so it's a very, we can say, collective work. About the presentation, I would like to touch some points. The book structure that is divided in three parts, the three parts that are listed in this slide. But before, I like to consider some, we can say, research framework that we are engaged in this years together with Stefano Di Vita, that are very related to the work we did in the book. We are engaged in some researches that are here in this slide listed that are important for the spatial regeneration of the Valtellina mountain region. This research is connected with different programs. The regional landscape plan we are working on since the 2017. A recent research we are involved supporting the use of strategy for the Alpine macro region, and another one in the Interreg Alpine Space project that is planned to connect, that involves me and other colleagues of the Department of Architecture and Urban Study. But considering also the content of the book, where I want to focus on in this presentation, there are two, we can say, different dimensions in our academic research that are very important for the book. The thematic studio that we together, me and Stefano, taught in the recent year is a regeneration of the fragile landscape of the mountain areas of Valtellina in the academic years that are indicated in the slide, and above all, the PhD workshop behind the 2026 Winter Olympic Games, that is the main part of the book that I'm going to present. The three goals of the book, here you can see the list of the 17 students, PhD students that were involved in the workshop and also are the authors of the different part of the book. I was saying that the different goal that we deal in the book are the three one we present here: to analyze the territorial dynamics and transformation in the mountain region that is deeply characterized by territorial disparities. We try to work on the assessment of risks and opportunities of the mega events in order to drive larger and broader territorial regeneration in the mountain region that is characterized by polarities, by territorial disparities as this of Valtellina. And the third point is the attempt to contribute with a spatial place-based scenario to the sustainability of the mega event legacy in the mountain region. So with this kind of fragilities that are concerning the environmental and landscape character of the region, but also with the economic situation of territory as the Valtellina one, that is characterized in some part or in the high part of the valley by a very over tourism that is a rich economy of the valley, but in other parts of the valley with a weak economy, loss of we can say habitants, lack of services, and weak accessibility system. And so these are the conditions. We are not so interested in considering sustainability of the Olympic Games itself in the venues where the Olympic Games were settled, but we are interested in analyzing the opportunities and the risk, on the other hand, that these mega events can generate in territory with this kind of fragility, with kind of condition. Try to figure out also the opportunity of these events. There are some we can say legacy, positive legacy that these events can leave to this territory, we can say trigger some positive improvement of the condition, of the economic condition, social condition, and we can say settlement condition of the mountain region. The work of the book is organized in three parts. The first is the part dedicated to the risk and opportunity of the Winter Olympic Games for the Valtellina mountain region, and very important contribution to this part has been the analysis of the Winter Olympic Games in the Alpine macro region, and which are the legacy of these events, past events in the Alpine macro region. The second part is concerning the place-based scenario, so the attempt of the book, also with the contribution of the PhD candidate, to define possible place-based scenarios to valorize the legacy, and so to trigger the regeneration of the Valtellina mountain region, considering three different topics: sports and well-being, for the diversification of tourism, cultural environmental landscape, to increase and to valorize the identity of the mountain territory, and the networks and the sustainable mobility as a condition to make accessible this the different part of the valley that are not so accessible in the present condition. Another point of this second part is, we can say, an attention to the different level of the governance that are involved, that can be part of the construction of a planning scenario for this region, that are not so, we can say, engaged in this perspective. So we see that there is a weakness in the role that spatial planning from the different level, from the regional level, from the province level, or from the local level, also are able to create a connectivity with the Olympic Games action. And the third point is, the third part of the book is concerning what are the possible perspective, and so which are the further research for the Valtellina mountain region, considering on one side the opportunities of mega events to deal with the territorial disparities of remote areas as Valtellina, and on the other hand the necessary transition beyond the traditional spread of urban mega events to mountain region. This is a very specific condition of the Olympic Winter Games of Milan Cortina, where there is a sort of contrast between the urban dimension of the Olympic Games, of the Winter Olympic Games in the city of Milano, and the mountain region that is involved as a venue for a lot of the events of this kind of games. These are very quickly the three parts of the book. Some images that describes the work that has been done considering the previous Olympic Games in the Alpine region. So the case studies that has been analyzed and investigated in the book, considering that now we are facing a very condition, a very specific condition that is characterized by different crises, an environmental one, the climate one, the economic one, and so it made more fragile the territory of the mountain region where the Olympic Games take place. The other image is interesting because put in evidence the relation between the main city of the Pianura Padana with the Alpine system, and there is a stronger relation between this system, this cities system, and the Alpine venues, and so it's very interesting also this potentiality in to take in account for the future perspective. The other point that I mentioned is the other topic that has been addressed in the book and also in the work done by the PhD candidates is about the role of sports and well-being activities in order to rebalance the impact of urban tourism that, as mentioned, there was a very focus in the high part of the valley, and the Olympic Games take part in the same places where the tourism is very intense, and the attempt of this strategy was to differentiate, to diversificate the attractiveness of the valley region in order to contribute to the spread of other kind of sustainable tourism, considering the opportunity of the Olympic Games as a driver for the increase of this different tourism. The other point other issues that has been addressed in the workshop that has been based on research by design and approach was the cultural and environmental landscape. So the quality of this peculiar landscape of the valley as an opportunity that should be valorized, that should be increased with a strong identity, with a lot of historical values, a lot of natural attractiveness that are not so valorized in, we can say, in the economy of the tourism, but we have other economies as the agriculture one or other productive activities that are important for the valley that are leaving we can say a weakness during the last decades, but are very important in perspective for create a new condition for the development of the valley. And this can be another occasion that the Olympic Games could valorize, could stimulate in perspective. The other point that I mentioned was about accessibility. Even in this topic, there is an attempt to figure out different kind of mobility, sustainable mobilities that can, we can say, integrate the railway that is interrupted in Tirano, and so is not an infrastructure usable to reach the high part of the valley, Livigno and Bormio, where the Olympic Games will take place, and the possibility to integrate the railway public transportation with another public transportation that is the bus, the electric bus, or for the main routes, and locally to create new hubs, new nodes to valorize the different places along the line, with the creation of a new hub with different topics that are related to sports, culture, and the other that has been addressed in the other part of the book. And the last part is about, as I mentioned, the role of governance that is, we can say, weak in combination. Yes, I conclude. Okay.
I'm deeply sorry to interrupt, but if you can move to the conclusions,
yes,
we'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I conclude. So this last point is about the level of governance that demonstrate a sort of weakness in contribute to the, we can say, to the build of some special scenario in relation to the Olympic Games. And these are the final, we can say, demands that we analyze in the last part of the book, and some possible answer that we analyze, and so that I already mentioned at the beginning. So I think that what is I think interesting in the work we did, also in the topic we deal with, is about the attempt to try to combine a critical condition of fragilities of this mountain region with the opportunity of the Olympic Games, and considering we can say a long scenario as a interesting perspective for planning, also as a contribution to make the legacy a long-term legacy for the valley, and opportunity for the development of the mountain region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. I now turn to Francesca Vigotti, who's an assistant professor here at TASTU, and will moderate the roundtable among experts and public administrators regarding the 2026 mega event. The floor is yours.
So thank you, Davide. Thanks to the organizer and to the speakers for their presentation. Thanks to Daniel Wolfe for his keynote, and for the insights and the reflections on the core topics of this seminar. I want to welcome and introduce our invited speakers. First of all, we have Dr. Samantha Antonioli, who is Deputy Major for the Olympics and Sports Mega Events of the Municipality of Bormio. Then we will have Dr. Matteo Basso, who is Assistant Professor of Urban Planning at UAV. Dr. Marcello Rossi, who is National Council Member of the Consiglio Nazionale di Architetti, Pianificatori, Paesaggisti e Conservatori, and founder of Consalez Rossi Architetti Associati. And Dr. finally, Gloria Zavatta, who is Sustainability and Impact Director for the Milan Cortina 2026 Foundation. Welcome to you all. And the first question of this roundtable is for Dr. Antonioli. Our first questions pivots around how does the 2026 event connects with the long-term strategies and plans for the city of Bormio, and how will the legacy contribute to the future plans, and asking you if this is an opportunity to strengthen the network of Alta Valtellina. Thank you.
Thank you everybody. I'm an honor to be here and to represent Bormio, my town, and also the Valtellina cluster, the Valtellina where Bormio host town is in. Of course, Bormio is part of the Alpine macro region that we have seen written, and which is the title of this event, and has an important role in the Milano Cortina Olympics, because it's important part of some of the races. The connection between the Olympics and our everyday life is because we are since 30 years part of the mountain ski Alpine races, and that's why we have been chosen to represent the Olympics. This is also the meaning of the Olympic agenda, to reuse venues and not to build new infrastructures. So this is the main connection, I would say. The legacy for future plans has three different topics. First of all is a legacy of services and infrastructures, because we will remodern some of the infrastructure, like the ski stadium, for example, at the bottom of the Stelvio slope, or we will have some new public spaces or new arenas that are sport arenas in town that are being remoderned. Nothing is going to be built from scratch, from new. We will also improve the tourism attractiveness. That's a main point, and we are investing as a town on the tourism international visibility. And also, I would like to underline the fact that Olympics are a lot about infrastructures, and we are in the Politecnico, so this is normal, but Olympics are a lot about people. And the growth of the human capital in our little town that has to deal with such a big event is really an opportunity. So these are the connection and also the opportunities for being part of this event.
Thank you very much. And our second question is connected to the question about Bormio and Alta Valtellina. It's for Dr. Zavatta. And the macro-regional system of the 2026 Winter Olympics is quite complex. How hard do you see the sustainability of the event at the regional and local levels?
Thank you. And yes, it's very difficult to manage 10 municipalities in 4 regions with the distances that from the Milan to Anterselva, the last municipality from Milan is 400 kilometers. So it's a very complex from a governance point of view, and but also should offer some opportunities. The opportunities, in fact, are the one mentioned by Samantha before me. In fact, in the Games 2026, we will have different locations that are among the best in the world for the assigned disciplines. And I mentioned biathlon with Anterselva, downhill with Bormio and Cortina, cross country with Tesero, and so on. And these locations are already operating organizations used to organize such kind of events. That is very, very important because they were chosen during the candidature phase because they had already this competence, not only the infrastructure, but also the competence of organizing such big events. So the IOC has published, has issued this new model called EDE models, Event Delivery Entities, that has the objective to involve the local capacity to manage these kind of sporting events. And this kind of organization, such as Bormio, Fondazione Bormio, Fondazione Cortina, Anterselva is another name, I don't remember at the moment, sorry, or in Tesero Predazzo, will remain after these games with an increased capacity, an increased professionality, and an increased opportunity for next events in the future. I would like to add some example of the complexity, but also the opportunity. And for instance, for the complexity, one practical issues. In the different regions, we don't know if glass could stay in the container with plastics or alone. Just to give an example, it's very simple for the people living there, but not for the spectators, for tourists, and for us for organizing the separate collection on site. The reuse of food or of unused food in some regions, Veneto for instance, they have already, or also in Milan, quite very well organized system for use again the food remaining from GDO supermarkets or different other markets, etc. In some other region is not so developed the system because there are logistics problems and so on. So we can support the games, can push, can disseminate some good practices along the Alps. There are some activities that are not specific for the site, for the location, such as the sourcing. We are doing a great job in asking our providers to be more sustainable. We have a collaboration with Politecnico to define the sustainability of temporary infrastructure, a sort of LEED protocol. Do you ever heard about the LEED protocol, I suppose, for permanent buildings? With the Politecnico of Milan, we are trying to understand how to define sustainability for overlays for temporary energy production and for what we call the look and feel, such as the panels or the elements that can show the brand of the games. And this is not site-specific, but will be involving every kind of providers in Anterselva, in Milan, and in Bormio as well. So there are many other examples. We also would like to involve the NOC, NPC, IFs, so the National Olympic Organization, the National Paralympic Organization, the broadcasters, the media, to adopt some measures that can be more and more sustainable, not sustainable as absolute term, because I hate this absolutely use it. But for instance, how to use the new port rail guidelines, how to communicate in case of gender, in case of people with disability, not using this, let me say, the usual terminology that sometimes are not inclusive at all, and in some other times are also offensive. Or we are doing a JEDI assessment along all of our functional areas to understand if it's possible to be more inclusive in terms of JEDI aspects. So there are many examples of that.
Thank you very much. And let's say that speaking about sustainability, the impacts and the legacies on the territory of Milan Cortina 2026, I have a question for Dr. Rossi. What is the role of the architecture and landscape design in the planning and making of the 2026 Winter Olympics in the territory of Milan, but also in the Alpine territories will be involved in the Games? Thank you.
Yes, first of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here. I'm speaking on the point of view of Consiglio Nazionale degli Architetti. So it's an organization that joins all the professionals. In each city, in each region, we have a local association of the province. And I think I would like to prefer to speak about also some legacy that we already maybe missed, in order to have some recommendation for the future. Joining all the architects of Sondrio, Trento, Bolzano, Milano, we created a group of National Council in order to work with the local authorities, in order to find procedures that could be not extraordinary, but become ordinary. And we didn't succeed doing that. So we have a commissar. We couldn't use this Milano Cortina, as we tried with Expo, also Expo 2015. We were not able to work with the institution in order to find procedures that could be replaced and could be also established. So this was the first thing that we didn't succeed. So speaking about the sustainability and legacy, this is something that we can improve in order to find some fixed rules. For example, the rule of architects is really central in the quality of space, in the relation, and also in the spread of architects all over the territories. And we tried to work with all the local municipalities, for example, to favor the public tenders, concorsi di progettazione, in order to spread the participation. And actually, we could do one in Livigno, the transformation of a petrol station into a store, and that was a good success that we could get, but it was only one in order to all the main projects that are being done in this period. So some criticism about that. It is very interesting, for example, in order to find something for example, for the Cultural Olympiad, maybe we can use the lesson that we had with the Expo 2015 in Expo in Città. That was a really maybe the best legacy of Expo 2015, because this gave the knowledge of the value of the territories spread not only in the area of Expo, but all over Milan city. And with these Olympics, we can work with all the local regions in order to favorite. They are also in the mountain. There are very weak regions, and this is really a good opportunity. And maybe we can work with the authorities. For example, for Expo in Città, there was a sportello unico done by the municipality that was very important, because it was a very good mean in order to get, yes, and it was a special sportello unico only for that period, and it was really operative and gave the opportunities to realize this when Stefano spoke about 46,000 in 1,000 locations. So maybe I was looking for in your site about the Cultural Olympiad, and there is now a site, but I think it's not so easy to find. For example, that effort that Sportello Unico gave in order to facilitate all these initiatives. So some critics, but also something to learn in order to have a legacy also on the procedures. And then the rule of architects is the quality of space, but this is another item, maybe much more important, but I think it's not the point of view of the National Council. Thanks.
Thank you very much for giving the perspective about opportunities and threats in a way as well. So thank you very much. And now focusing on the Veneto region, I will ask Dr. Basso, what is his insight into the plans and projects for the 2026 Winter Olympic Games in general and in Veneto region in particular? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question and for the invitation. I will try to offer very briefly some insights by reconstructing the public debate which is ongoing in the Veneto region. They start, first of all, from the observation as a resident in the region and also, obviously, as a researcher. I think that the first big critical point is the lack of the spatial vision from a urban planning perspective, which means that there is actually no connection between the different clusters of sites of the Olympics, both at the macro regional level, but also as regards the Veneto region. In a sense, you know, Cortina is up north. There is where things are happening and construction are ongoing, but there is a huge distance between the mountain and the other, the polycentric regional system and urban system of the region, and also the capital, Venice. For instance, the connection between Venice and Cortina is always, recalled only when talking about the connection between the airport and the mountains in the north. So I think it's some kind of a missed opportunity to reflect about the connection between the mountains, the other cities in the region, and the in-between territories. The second point is obviously it's about the environmental impacts. There has been a huge debate, particularly when talking about the construction of the Bob track, as regards the destruction of wood and natural resources to give space to the new infrastructure, which is only partially reused by the 1956 Olympics. And this also calls into reflection the impact of tourism. There is a sort of fear of mass touristification. Cortina is already kind of driven by tourism development, but there is a huge debate ongoing about the risks that the Olympics will bring tourists, and so real estate prices will go up, and the overcrowding of the mountains areas will continue to grow. There is an issue as regards the cost, especially the cost overruns, which is typical phenomenon when talking about mega events and mega projects in general. And there is a big issue about the legacy and the costs of maintaining the structure, such as, again, the Bob track, maintaining in the future that kind of structure. And the first point that I think is really relevant, and sometimes it also creates a gap between the IOC 2020 agenda, which was explained at the beginning in the keynote speech. It is about the lack of any clear reflection about public transportation. And this is critical because we are referring to an event which is spread along 3 different regions, and also within the region is spread. I'm talking about Veneto region, Cortina, Verona, people coming through the airport and going up north. And the public transportation investment is being very, I mean, it's not been taken into account. For instance, they invested a lot of money to complete partially the railway line, to reinforce the railway line from Venice towards Belluno in the north till Calalzo, but no a reflection about how then to actually manage the transportation of people in a sustainable way from Calalzo towards the mountains in Cortina. So I think that is, again, a big issue. And again, reconstructing the public debate, I feel that, you know, people, especially the social movements, you know, protesting also again the Olympics, are actually highlighting that a lot has been invested in roads, infrastructures, parking lots, bypasses in Longarone, for instance, Cortina itself, but not massively on the public transportation. I think it's a lost opportunity.
Thank you so much. I think that the 4 key points you have bring are deeply interesting. And now I leave the word to Davide, who is going to read the message from Deputy Mayor Tancredi. Thank you.
Yes, so Deputy Mayor for Urban Regeneration of the City of Milan cannot be present, so I'm going to read a letter I received from him today. Dear Professor Poncini, dear all, I deeply regret not being able to be with you today. Unfortunately, a last-minute institutional commitment has prevented me from attending this afternoon's engaging discussion. 2 publications that form the basis of today's reflections offer an insightful exploration of the relationship between major events and urban development, particularly as our city gets ready to host the upcoming Winter Olympic Games. I will discuss 2 core questions. The first is how does the 2026 event connect with the strategies and plans of the city of Milan? The 2026 Olympics coincide with a pivotal period of growth for the city of Milan, contributing significantly to its increasing global appeal. Among the key infrastructures being developed are the Olympic Village, which is set to be repurposed as a student residence, and the hockey arena, designed to remain a versatile venue for events, concerts, and sporting activities. Both these projects represent some of the most modern and architecturally impressive structures in Italy. These developments align seamlessly with the city's broader strategy to expand its urban footprint and diversify its central functions. By doing so, Milan aims to alleviate pressure on its historic center
while simultaneously leveraging urban regeneration in peripheral areas. In terms of legacy, there is an ongoing effort to facilitate high sports within the arena during the event year, further enhancing its utility. The Olympic Village, which will become Italy's largest student residence with 1,700 accommodations, addresses a pressing issue: the availability of housing for the growing population of out-of-town students. This facility will operate in partnership with the municipality of Milan, supporting the city's long-term educational and housing strategies. Second question: how will the two main projects of the Santa Giulia Arena and the Porta Romana Olympic Village impact the transformation of the two neighborhoods, and how does this approach differ from the experience of the Expo with the Mine District? I'm still reading Mr. Tancredi's words. The Santa Giulia Arena and the Porta Romana Olympic Village are integral components of two major urban regeneration initiatives. The Olympic Village is part of the transformation of the Porta Romana rail yard, an area spanning more than 200,000 square meters. This project envisions the creation of a new vibrant neighborhood combining residential spaces, both market rate and social housing, with public services, urban amenities, and a large park. It will serve to reconnect the surrounding neighborhoods, bridging the northern and southern parts of the city. Notably, the area already hosts key cultural and business assets such as Fondazione Prada and the Symbiosis Office District. This regeneration process is reshaping what was once an industrial zone into a dynamic urban hub. A similar transformation is taking place around the Santa Giulia Arena, which is part of the larger Santa Giulia redevelopment project near the Rogoredo district. One of the most significant projects currently underway in the city, it envisions the development of a new neighborhood with residential areas, retail spaces, public services, and a park covering over 300,000 square meters, comparable in size to Parco Sempione. Both projects aim to bridge previously disconnected parts of the city, fostering new connections and urban continuity. In contrast, the Mine District, developed following the 2015 Expo, represents the creation of an entirely new urban area. Prior to Expo, the site had limited functions, primarily parking lots and abandoned spaces. Today, Mine stands as a metropolitan-scale innovation district, representing a new frontier in Milan's urban development. I wish you all a fruitful exchange. I sincerely apologize once again for my absence. Please accept my warmest regards. Giancarlo Tancredi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now a question for Dr. Zavatta, which is about also the images that we saw in the keynote by Daniel. In Paris 2024, we see how the city and its symbol were put in iconic areas in the spotlight. How will the city of Milan use the event for the sustainable transformation of these sites? Thank you.
Thank you. I think that Paris, the organizer of Paris 2024 were very brave. They really push a lot of new ways of organizing the games. So, and also to intervene in the cities. Of course, they had not success in everything, but it's quite normal. Which with one event you cannot solve all the problem of a society and of the world. That is true. But really they changed the different elements of the games organization. First of all, the elements of the city, the iconic elements of the city, they were so stressed. And but also from another point of view, they introduced in the school level 30 minutes of sporting activities every day. They were really inclusive in terms of a specific group of vulnerable people and so on. We of course, we are not copying, but we are trying to do the same. I was very interested by the relation done by Mr. Wolfe, because he mentioned that lots of social aspects that also a game can spread. And again, I can mention the port rail guidelines, but also the accessibility plan we are introducing in our games in the different regions with different complexity, because again, the typical activities organized by the foundation, the organizing committee should support by different stakeholders, from the governance level to the regional levels, to the municipality levels, to companies, market operators, non-profit organization, and so on. And there are so different levels, and everyone can and must be part of this organization. And the different criticism that can arise definitely could be managed by different levels and different partnership in terms of stakeholders that could take some decision or take not some decision. So is in your question, how will the city of Milan use the event for the sustainable transformation? I can mention one case. Milan wants to remain an attractive city for tourism. And as you probably know, at the international level, there are different networks that are qualifying the cities in terms of sustainability. And one issue is the tourism, the accommodation infrastructure, so hotels, other accommodations, the location for events, and so on. And this element for Milan is not at the highest level possible. So the city of Milan has these objectives. The Chamber of Commerce has this objective to sustain the tourism in Milan, also in the future. And the Chamber of Commerce, for instance, make a bid for give support, financial support to hotels that reach a certification for sustainability standard. And we are happy for that, very happy, because again, our common objective is to reach a more sustainable tourism. Infrastructure such as hotels, accommodation facilities could have a good and a very important role in these objectives, taking their own part in the organization of their own activities in a more sustainable way. So this is an example of synergies in objectives, synergies of activities. So we are pushing in one way, Chamber of Commerce is pushing in our way, the city of Milan is also pushing in another way. This element of a more sustainable tourism aspect was in one of the plans that Milan approved a couple of years ago, was the air quality and climate plan that include also this part, because a more sustainable hotel is also has also less emission in terms of CO2 emissions, but also other pollutants, and why not? Can contribute to the level of the entire municipality. And so this is just a small example, but there are many others that can contribute. The accessibility I mentioned, that there are different organizations that are working together with the Ministry of for Disabilities for improve the accessibility of different facilities, infrastructures, for mobility, etc., etc. This is our way to try to influence the different aspects of a city or of a territory to let this territory be a little bit more sustainable in the future, thanks to the games.
Thank you very much. And now a question about legacy, in fact, to Dr. Antonioli. How did you balance reusing existing structures and building them from anew? And what is the progress and future expectation of the new projects? And would you make the same decisions again or not? Thank you.
As I said before, most of the investments that will be done or started in the Bormio area are actually reusing structures. I put down all the list. So we have the venue, which is the Pista Stelvio. We have the sport arena, the ski stadium. We have a revamping, just to be very practical, revamping of the lighting system. Snowmaking system will be, that's a big investment, will be remodern. And also the energy upgrade. And there are lots of work, lots of construction site at the moment. And as a municipality, we are actually happy that we have two boundaries. One is the economic boundary, the amount that has been given to do all these works. And the second boundary is the timing. And in Italy, we are very happy to have this timing. And all this that I just said is reusing, remoderning. We also have some new structures. One of the new structure is the basin that will be used as at the top of the mountain to keep the water during the summer season and to provide the snowmaking system where the temperature will allow it. And also new roundabouts and viability in the Bormio area. Those are the new projects. And to give an answer to Professor Basso regarding the public investments in public mobility, actually, I know what's happening in the Lombardy region, in our area, just because I'm more focused on that. There's a big investment in the train system, in the railway that goes from Milano to Tirano, which is our railway, is around, if I say right, is 130 million investments. We have really big problems now because for 3 years in a row, the railway has been closed for the summer, which is really not easy to handle. And we have new trains, new railways, and we only have one track. So they are providing to give some chances for the train. I'm not very technical to swap, let's say that. So that's a big investment, a public investment that is going to be done in transport. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for the comparison between Lombardy and Veneto. I think it's very interesting. So another question for Dr. Rossi is about how does the Italian architectural ecosystem will benefit from the 2026 Winter Olympics in the long term? Thank you.
I think that the Italian architectural system won't benefit directly. For example, Milan, after Expo 2015, when the system had really a very wide benefit. And also the perception of the quality of architecture is much different now than, for example, 20 years ago in the rule of transformation of the city. So we are a fundamental partner. And this is really a very important issue, and it changed a lot. I think always in order to find some better opportunities, maybe, for example, looking at the experience that is going now, the main projects are private, they are not public. For example, the arena in Santa Giulia is a private project. Porta Romana is a private project. So maybe a public, a stronger public rule is important in order to also to have a better participation and to spread all over also in the future, the benefits of these opportunities. A second thing that could be improved also now is also in the end of the book Milan Cultural Mega Events is to favorite the participation of the stakeholders like Politecnico and Consiglio Nazionale, because we can be really an opportunities in order to find the best practice and the best solution in long term, not only in the extraordinary moment of the Milano Cortina or Expo. Milan, after Milano Cortina, maybe we can find also a crisis, because after these 10 years started from Expo, they will conclude, the major will end his second turn of, and so maybe there also can be a crisis after these 10 years of really growth of Milan. So to find the role of stakeholder, to find the public rule in the governance, I think can be also an important condition for the rule of architecture.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that the theme of inclusion and of participation has popped out from many of the presentations. So also the inclusion on the long term, for the long term success, it's very important. Thank you very much. And now the final question to Dr. Basso. How does the hard deadline affect the governance of the mega events plans and projects? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the question. I think that the hard, the movable deadline is one that diversifies the planning process connected to the organization of mega events compared to ordinary planning processes. You know, the 7 years time frame where you are awarded as a city the event, and the time where you have to open is immovable. So that somehow stresses the planning process. And I think it's together with the interference of supranational organization, it means also regulations such as the one produced by the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, together with the establishment of ad hoc agencies, special agencies that, you know, bring forward the planning process. This undoubtedly, you know, sets up a planning process which is conceived as exceptional and a sort of planning practice under pressure. Because the aim is obviously to speed up the process and to be on track with what is promised. You can go beyond the opening official, because this means, you know, a symbolic failure for the country, for the city. And I think that it generates some consequences as regards the governance and the planning process. On the one hand, as regards the network of actors and also the allocation of decision-making powers. On the one hand, you see you have a verticalization of the planning process. You know, the special commissioners, government commissioners who take the power to decide, but also the special agencies who are given a role and powers to take decision, and the concentration of in their hands of the planning powers. There's obviously a technicalization of the planning process and the subsequent depoliticization. In fact, we see that, you know, the compression of moment dedicated to real participation in the civil participation in the planning process, and the important roles played by technicians, but also international experts, practitioners, consultants that travel around the globe and bring their own knowledge to the cities to define and to design the projects. And I think that there's also consequence in terms of let's say, the planning procedures, or because they are speed up, and there is a suspension and derogation of ordinary planning procedures. Obviously, this is announced and it is introduced in order to speed up the process, but as we have seen in the case of Milano 2015 Expo, it also generated, the diffusion of illegal practices, corruption, and etc. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all our guests and the speakers for their insights on the theme of this seminar. I give the word back to Davide, to Abdallah, and thank you very much.
So I want to thank again our guests, really lively discussion, and we decided to have a very brief conclusion. And I now turn to Abdallah Girej, who is a PhD candidate in urban planning, design and policy here at Politecnico. And Abdallah is completing his PhD dissertation about the planning and sustainability of winter games in particular. And he's also one of the co-authors of one of the two books. So Abdallah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Davide. Thank you all for your valuable contributions throughout today's seminar. We've heard insightful perspectives on the 2026 Winter Olympics, particularly as they relate to the Milanese and Valtellina context. These discussions are timely, as less than 2 years separates us from this event. First, Professor Metrangolo, Professor Gaeta, and Professor Bicocoli in his letter highlighted the role that the academia and the urban planning, design, and policy PhD program plays as an actor in driving and advancing critical discussions on major events like the upcoming Winter Olympics. Discussions, but not only, also on the practical level and the role of sport in universities, as Professor Metrangolo explained. Their contributions have underscored how such events shape the territories in which they take place and how academic insight can support throughout planning and sustainable developments for the future. Daniel Wolfe, keynote speaker in our seminar, has set the stage for us to consider the broader implications of mega events planning, raising critical questions about sustainability and long-term impact. He especially highlighted the floating significant fire, as you said, yeah. When it comes to the meaning of sustainability, he posed the questions on what if green does mean sustainable. He also presented the model of sustainability that he developed with Professor Muller and their team. Daniel also highlighted that while the model they developed might be biased and not 100% accurate, however, lessons can be learned and extracted from it. He also presented the insights from the most recent games in Paris and how the summer games were reshaped by the Olympic Agenda 2020, that in theory were reshaped also the upcoming Winter Olympics, and how despite the reforms, some problems are persistent, especially regarding economic and social sustainability. He concluded that there are important moves towards sustainability, but problems have still to be resolved. The two presentations by Professor De Vita and Professor Arcidiacono on the books by the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies shed the light on two different and crucial aspects of the games. One entered in detail in one region directly affected by the games by analyzing their territorial dynamics and transformations, the Alta Valtellina, while the other book studied 5 propositions in order to problematize the mega events decade. It also discussed the cultural aspect of the Cultural Olympiad of the games based on previous case studies and its importance in the upcoming Winter Olympics. Finally, the panel discussion moderated by Francesca have shed light on the crucial steps being taken by local administrators, including the Councillor Antonioli's focus on Bormi's preparations and developments on the territory. We also heard important insights from Gloria Zapata, who highlighted how the Milan Cortina 2026 Foundation is approaching the games with a focus on sustainability and legacy. Her intervention highlighted the complexities of the games, in particular on the logistical level, since we have a very spread model. However, she underlined opportunities related to the areas that will host the competitions and their historical importance in terms of hosting sporting winter events. Architect Marcello Rossi explained the barriers that architects and planners on the national level they are facing, and they faced in the past with the Expo 2015, and how opportunities should present themselves. Professor Basso gave us an insight about the preparations in the Veneto region for the Games by reconstructing the public debate in the region, in particular regarding the connections between the city of Venice and mountains. The letter from Councillor Tancredi discussed finally the new urban developments taking place on the Milanese territory in their brand legacy. One of the keynote takeaways from today's is that the legacy of the 2026 Winter Olympics will not only be measured by the success of the events itself, but by its lasting impacts on the urban regeneration, the preservation of cultural heritage and sustainable developments across the Alpine macro-region and Milan. These efforts must align with the needs of both the local communities and the broader global challenges of environmental responsibility and economic resilience. Thank you once again for your participation today, and we look forward for seeing how the ideas that this seminar shaped will also shape the future of the 2026 Winter Olympics, future Winter Games, and beyond. Thank you.
So once again, thank you. And just a reminder, tomorrow we're going to have more this debate, 9:30, Building 12. On Wednesday, the City of Milan will hold an event regarding the Olympics and PNRR at Palazzo Morando, 6 p.m. I'm sure there will be more discussion about this all. And I believe that today's contributions will benefit the opinion making and the general public. So thank you once again, and this is it for now. Thank you.